Hello everybody, welcome to The Take. I'm your host, Krishna Mano, and as the summer is almost over, there's a new problem that has risen, relating to school. And I can assure you, I'm not talking about the treasure hunt-like adventure that goes behind finding all the items on a school supplies list. No, it's something much worse than that. The problem I'm talking about kills thousands every year, happens much too often, and rhymes with the glass bootings. Yes, I'm talking about mass shootings. I know, we just did an episode on school shootings in June. But in this episode, my investigative team, which is just me due to severe underfunding, has gone on the field to discover the ins and outs of the gun violence problem and the movement that is trying to stop it. Also, before we start, I have worked all summer on this episode, literally the day after I published the video on school shootings. Going to a protest here in Grand Rapids downtown, organized by March for Our Lives, interviewing state senators, representatives, other elected officials and candidates for this year's midterm elections, and gun control activists, and spending hours upon hours editing this video so that you can now enjoy it. So please consider subscribing and sharing the episode with friends who may enjoy it as well. Now, where was I? Right, protest. For this, we're gonna have to go back. Way back. All the way back to June 18th. March for Our Lives, an organization established by a few of the victims of the Parkland shooting in 2018, including X Gonzalez and David Hogg, led a nationwide march on March 24th of that year. An action that moved many adults and inspired elected officials to draft legislation, because kids were now stepping up. Legislation that is clearly ineffective, because these school shootings haven't stopped. Time and time again, they have relentlessly reappeared on the news every few months, now becoming somewhat of a normal occurrence. Which is why March for Our Lives, along with the support of a whole new generation of students, followed through with a second march on, you guessed it, June 18th, 2022.
Actually, there is no way that anyone could have guessed that, just saying.
What do you mean? I literally just said it, 30 seconds ago.
Buddy, I hate to break it to you, but you're so boring that I forgot what you said a second ago, let alone 30 seconds.
That was uncalled for, Benny. We will be having a conversation about your actions immediately after shooting this episode. Is that clear?
Oh, you want to know what else is uncalled for? You calling my calling uncalled for. You know what? That's it. I quit.
Oh my god, Benny, I hate you so much.
You are one clever guy, Krishna. You are a clever guy. But thank you.
Back to the matter at hand. That is how I found myself in the middle of about 50 peaceful demonstrators in the downtown of my home city, Grand Rapids. The event began at the Veterans Memorial Park, and right below the proud, prominent, Merkin as can be eagle was a memorial for the victims of the Uvalde shooting at Robb Elementary School in May of 2022, complete with stuffed animals that reflected the overall mood of the crowd. Mournful and reflective, yet motivated and invigorated to bring about change. An unusually large amount of people asked me if I was from New York, due to my hat, but I decided to embrace the New Yorker spirit anyways. I'm walking over here. Maybe a bit too much. While the total number of protesters was relatively small, the group was quite definitely diverse. Old, young, LGBTQ, elected leaders, activists, you name it. Even dogs were there, although some might not have totally understood the objective. It was quite fitting with the location that the event was kicked off with a speech by a veteran who has now become a gun control activist, Albi. After marching around downtown, I was honored to have the opportunity to sit down with Albi to have a serious discussion about how their experiences as a veteran allowed them to look at this problem with a different perspective.
Every year, a Marine has to go through 2 weeks of training to re-qualify for their weapons. And that's every day for like 2 weeks. And even then, living on a military base, you're not allowed to open carry. We have to turn our private weapons in, and they store it for us. Now, if our most lethal fighters for our country aren't allowed to carry their own weapons, what makes civilians think they have that right? We're not average Americans. We are veterans. We, at one point in our lives, gave up all of our rights to service others. And for us, it doesn't matter who that citizen is. Every American citizen has those same rights. And as veterans, we gave up our rights so others could have some. And this is one of those things, weapons, guns, they're meant for violence. And veterans who have served, who we understand a sacrifice. We sacrifice so others didn't have to. And yet, we don't have good gun reform laws. And it doesn't matter. We can say it all we want, but something's got to change.
But it's always essential to hear from different points of view on the same topic, to craft your own opinion. I had the opportunity to do this when I talked with Christina VanEyl, a member and volunteer at Moms Demand Action. Could you please tell me a little bit about yourself for the viewers and I, and what you do at Moms Demand Action?
I am just an ordinary person, an ordinary mother. Although you don't have to be a mom to be part of Moms Demand Action, we call ourselves Mothers and Others. I started getting more involved with the Grand Rapids chapter a few years ago, about 4 years ago. And right now my current role is as communications lead. It's a volunteer position. All of our people are volunteers. And so my goal, my job is to be the forward face of moms, so to put out press releases and try to get press to come to our events and do interviews.
Was there a personal experience or event that motivated you to become a member of Moms Demand Action, or just inspired you to become an activist for gun control and hold our elected officials responsible and accountable for their actions?
Columbine was a kind of a turning point for me in my life. I was able to actually travel to Littleton, Colorado, and interview some of the students who had been in the building, as well as some of their parents. And it was devastating for the whole community. And I think it was at that point that I started to realize the impact that gun violence has, not just on individuals, not just on those who are murdered, but those that survive, those that are traumatized and wounded and incapacitated for life. And so it was at that point that I started kind of tracking gun violence statistics. And as the years went on, I became more and more involved, interested, as it were. And then after Sandy Hook, that's when Moms Demand Action actually became a thing unto itself. So I started following that and actually joined about 4 years later. So it's been a long journey, and it's a painful journey. The more that you're aware, the more painful it is to understand that gun violence isn't just the mass shootings that you hear about when you hear about them, but that gun violence includes domestic violence, it includes suicide by gun, it includes unintentional shootings, children who have access to weapons that aren't stored safely. And these are all the things that Moms focuses on. And so again, the more you know, the harder it is actually to, but it's also becomes more motivating to understand what a big problem it is and how many things we can do to make the world safer. One mother told me about her daughter, and they were, I think, in the music room, and they heard the shots and they went into lockdown mode. And the daughter tried to leave the room, and one of her fellow students grabbed her by her overalls. She was wearing bib overalls, and he grabbed her and pulled her back in the room and probably saved her life. So for that mother, of course, that's just a horrific thing to have to live with. I think even then I had young children, but I had children, and I think I was always kind of in the position of understanding the parents, what the parents were going through, and how terrifying for them. There was also one of the children that was murdered at Columbine. His name was Daniel, and I have a son, Daniel. So of course it always just touches you different when it feels that close. And they had nothing in common but the name, but still I felt a lot of empathy for that family in particular.
Right, and to know that those stories were multiplied by the hundreds and now thousands as more school shootings happen every year.
Every year, and we have failed, but we go from here. We do what we can going forward. There are no do-overs, sadly, but we take what we learn and we push on.
How are congresspeople and state elected officials currently supporting Moms Demand Action and their cause, and other organizations and nonprofits that do similar things?
There are several people who do support the work of Moms Demand and are advocates for gun safety, and we deeply appreciate them and what they put forward. There is legislation pending right now. We assume it's going to go through because there does seem to be bipartisan support. So probably by the time this airs, we'll have an answer on that. But that's been terrific. It's taken so long. But the red flag laws all of these things that are in this bill will save lives. It's not quite enough. We will not quit. We will keep going. But we're grateful for the support that we've had in Congress. And in various states, there have been some legislators that have been very helpful to moms and very thoughtful about the mom's agenda. Michigan, not so much. We have work to do here, and we'll continue to try to do it.
Even after listening to these experts and their take on what policymakers can do to prevent mass shootings, I still felt like I needed more information to fully understand the situation at hand. It was as though I was convincing myself that I was high up in this tree of knowledge, but I was actually just a couple inches off the ground. I needed to hear from the people behind solving this problem. Wait a second, that's it. I needed to interview policymakers. That's how I found myself on a Zoom call with the mayor of Grand Rapids, Rosalynn Bliss. What steps has the city of Grand Rapids taken to prevent a school or mass shooting in general?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this question. It's personal to a lot of people, and unfortunately, I have a niece that goes to Oxford High School and was there that day of the shooting, and have seen firsthand just how unbelievably tragic it is to students. And then there's the trauma that all of us experience every time there's a shooting, especially in a high school. Every mass shooting is horrific, but I think it's been unbelievably tragic and traumatic as we all have watched these shootings unfold. So when I think about Grand Rapids, I think about a couple things. One is we have a really close partnership with Grand Rapids Public Schools and with other schools in the city of Grand Rapids. And GRPS has actually been, I'd say, very proactive even before these recent horrible mass shootings in schools. So for years, GRPS has been looking at safety measures, working really closely with their public safety department, doing a lot of communication with students and with parents about what their plan is, and not only around prevention, but if, a tragic event happens here. So a lot of the work I do as mayor is working in partnership and collaboration and make sure that I'm supporting the efforts of our schools to make sure they have the support they need to prevent any shooting. The bigger issue around gun violence, in my opinion, is that we need stronger gun laws. We need stronger gun safety laws. And a lot of people have reached out to me since a number of these shootings, and they ask me to pass local ordinances around gun safety. And unfortunately, I don't have the authority to do that. So that's a statewide issue and a federal issue. In fact, here in Michigan, the state has preempted local units of government from doing a whole host of things locally. And one of them is passing any type of gun ordinances. So it's frustrating as a mayor to see these tragedies and to want to do something about it and to have your hands tied. And I think that's the sentiment of mayors, not just throughout the state of Michigan, but really throughout the country.
Okay, so the city is unable to do much because they have to depend on the state and federal governments for funding and permission and other governmental things.
Not very descriptive, Also, why are your processes so complicated these days? Back in the 1770s, we just had common sense. We thought of something, we wrote a law about it, and it just happened. And then now you have to discuss things. It's so complicated.
Because humans are complicated, Benny. We have the attention span of a puppy and the knowledge of a chicken nugget. And people can blame social media all they want, but we all secretly know deep within us that One Direction splitting up is the cause behind all of this. One Direction, if you're watching this, we've been up all night dreaming about how perfect it was when you guys were together. So if you guys could get together just for 4 seconds, it would be enough to take me home to the good old days.
You got him.
You're right, I did. But guess who doesn't got him? This guy, because I'm still baffled about how we can solve this issue. Well, I guess we'll go up another level from the local government, the state level. For this, we will need the help of the state representative from Michigan's 75th House District, who is running to be the state senator of Michigan's 30th Senate District, David LaGrand.
Are there any steps being taken right now in the Michigan House of Representatives in response to the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was recently passed by the U.S. Congress? And could you please explain the act that was passed by the U.S. Congress?
Sure. So from my perspective, what Congress did was good, but certainly not sufficient to deal with the scope of the problem. There are some restrictions on gun dealers. There are some enhanced requirements for people under 21 for background searches, background checks, and then there are some tightening up on people who've committed domestic violence and their access to handguns. All of those are good. I don't think they really address the foundational problems nearly as much as we can and should. The media really likes to talk about mass shootings, and I suppose there are a number of reasons for those. One is that focal points really work well for media, and so if you look at, for example, the issue of job creation, if a factory comes into town and creates 100 jobs, it gets a lot of media attention. If 100 small businesses open and would they each employ 2 people, they would have created more jobs, but there's never media coverage of that because the events are too small. So mass shootings are a tailor-made topic for the media because more than one person got killed. There were a whole lot more people, and a lot of them were young people killed in the city of Chicago that weekend than were killed at the 4th of July parade. A lot more. And those shootings, nobody called out the federal resources to find out who had done those shootings. Those shootings are often inadequately responded to, inadequately investigated, and the total net damage to the community is clearly greater, if you want to count number of deaths, than the 4th of July shooting. Similarly, in the city of Grand Rapids, the number of murders has gone up alarmingly and unacceptably. those aren't mass shootings; those are individual issues. But cumulatively, they're a much bigger problem. And so, I think it's important that we actually focus on the national problem we have with violence and the national problem we have with gun violence. I mean, one of the bumper stickers I proposed says, "Guns turn arguments into tragedies," because if you and I got in an argument, in a fight on this couch right now, very low likelihood that anybody would die because neither one of us is holding a gun. But a gun could easily escalate something into a much bigger and more tragic event.
And just for good measure, now that we had the state house down, we had to look at the Michigan Senate. To achieve this goal, I was honored to get the chance to talk to Senator Winnie Brinks of Michigan's 29th Senate District, who is running for re-election for her final term this year.
How does this act specifically impact America at the state level, and specifically in Michigan's case?
So it would certainly help us implement some of the ideas that I just talked about. It would provide funding to help implement things like red flag laws, where we can remove a gun temporarily from a household where it's looking like that could be a potential source of danger, either for the inhabitants of the house or for other people. Things like the resources that can be brought to bear in a situation that can come from the federal government are really significant, and that can really help the state of Michigan in terms of implementing things. I also know there's funding in there that would help with mental health services and comprehensive plans for how to address safety in schools and provide ways for us to intervene sooner when we know there's a child who really is showing signs that they could use some intervention. We hear it time and time again when there's an incident at a school, if it's a student who's returning, a previous student, or a current student, we hear that teachers, adults, other students have noticed that child needs some additional services or may need some additional support or intervention, and providing the dollars to make that possible would be huge.
Now, with the help of lawmakers, elected officials, and activists, I was finally able to comprehend the world of mass shootings, and I hope this video guides you through it as well. What the problem is, how bad it has become in recent years, and where we can go from here. But it still leaves me with one question. If the issue is as clear as a conveniently crisply cut chandelier from a cookie cutter in Cheshire, Connecticut, why are so many Americans and legislators unwilling to take effective action? Well, folks, that is the unfortunate downside to the American dream. Free speech that harms the innocent. And in the modern U.S., ain't there nothing we can do about that. And until common sense kicks in and One Direction gets back together, we will have to stay strong, keep fighting, and constantly pressure our lawmakers to bring about change. And if your representative in Congress or the state legislature is not truly understanding your concerns, wish them farewell in this year's midterm elections in November. But most importantly, you should be proud of our country, but don't let that pride get over your head, because under all of that, there is a larger battle to be fought. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay safe and read the news.